It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Shelly Baer. She's a licensed clinical social worker and a substance abuse professional, SAP. We now would call her a CADC if it's a little different designation. She is the executive director and owner of Emerald Therapy Center. They have 6 locations here in Western Kentucky, so she is one of you. She is from here. And I'm going to go ahead and let her take over.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Yay, awesome. I'm so happy to be here. I lived for many, many years right down the road in Drafteville. My kids went to Marshall County and Christian Fellowship, so it feels good. I now live in Paducah. I am the owner of Emerald Therapy Center, and for a long time, I helped hospitals open programs, and I became very frustrated, even though I work with great organizations, that a lot of the resources didn't go back into patient care and staff care. So I worked a couple different jobs, maybe 3, and then started Emerald Therapy Center. We were itty-bitty, teeny-tiny, started out, and now we have 90 employees, 6 locations, and we have a facility in Murray, in Mayfield, and then 4 in Paducah. And we also have a psychiatry program with Dr. Blue. So we provide management as well. So I want to talk a minute about how this affected us. And these are kind of the areas that we're going to cover. But my experience was actually kind of twofold. Having a facility there, our facility wasn't damaged, but we lost water, power, utilities, and things like that for many weeks. But we had staff that didn't have homes and lost all sorts of belongings and in various things. So on one level, we were helping our staff find places to live very quickly, and we had some staff who were caregivers of other family members and all. So that was one element that we were involved in right out of the gate. But we also were very blessed that our facility was still standing. And then the other thing was being there at the fairgrounds. We had a donated trailer, and I'm talking it was just bare bones. We put materials and resources in it, and we staffed it at the fairgrounds, and it was cold. Rainy, windy. I remember doing interviews for like a couple of news stations out of Louisville from that trailer. And I'll never forget, I know why this resonates with me, but just the ground was so saturated for such a long time, and it was so cold. It wasn't like it had just rained, it was like it was just saturated. And that whole feeling felt like things you see in a movie and different things like that. And then our experience was we were asked to help with debriefing the first responders. And we already do a lot of different things with first responders. We do pre-employment assessments, some training, mental health assessments for them, mental health training. So we already had a really close relationship with our firefighters and police officers. It's so well that when I get stopped, I'm like, did I do but we love them and things. So then they called us back in. So we were some of the folks that worked with the people that got there at the Candle Factory first. And we did groups, and we still continue to do groups for that group of first responders that went in. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I remember talking with them. Even I think the last one we did was, I'm going to say it was very late in the fall, and they still were saying things like, it's fall. And what happens between Thanksgiving and Christmas? Decorations, home decor, candles are everywhere, right? And so many of the first responders have said that that's forever going to be a trigger for them, because when they got to the candle factory, it smelled like one huge candle, right? So their response to that, one of the responders said to me, I told my wife, I can't do it. I can't come home and have a candle burning. So what was a lovely, calming, safe thing to her was a huge trigger for him. So what we learn is that grief, trauma, all of those things, they change us forever, right? Now, that doesn't mean we can't go on and have an amazing life, because we are designed to do hard things. And all of us in this room have already done hard things, and we will continue to do hard things, and we'll continue to have a great life. But the other thing that comes with that is if you can blink and if you can breathe, life changes in a moment, and it never ever looks the same. Raise your hand if you've had that happen in your personal life. I certainly have. You know, I worked in trauma as a therapist and then had 3 young children and thought I knew a whole lot. You know, talk about humbling. You think you know something and then you have an experience where you have to live it. So I had a very young child. He was 4 at the time. He's totally grown now and just an amazing young man, but was hurt very, very badly by a neighbor's dog. We went through a lot of trauma, reconstructive surgery, all sorts of things like that. And it was the first time in my life where something couldn't be fixed quickly. It was very, very chronic. And guess what happened? Just like with the disaster, people sign up to help and they're there because a terrible thing has happened, but it's chronic and it goes on. It's not fixed quickly. There's not a Band-Aid, there's not a formula. It is chronic. So it changes us and it never looks the same. That being said, our job is to become resilient, become more resilient, and our responsibility is to have an amazing life and really take the bad things that happen to us. And I always say that bad things happen to good people. Take those things, even when we wouldn't choose them, even when we would never want a do-over, but take something from that and let it change you for the better. Whether it makes you wiser, more patient, more understanding, have more empathy, whatever. We take those things, and that's what creates a colorful, beautiful life. Kind of like a patchwork quilt. Anybody got a cool like quilt or painting or like something that's like all different textures and smells and it is beautiful, right? But it's not the same. There's a lot of bumps in that. So your life's going to be bumpy. Your life's already been bumpy, but it doesn't mean it can't be beautiful. It doesn't matter what's happened to you. When you have started your life, your responsibility is to take something from it and live a great life in spite of it. We know that your brain and your body responds to a traumatic event by protecting you. So when you see those sights and sounds of what's happened, your body thinks, hey guys, we're back here again. That's unsafe. So that's what our body does, and it's helping us that one time, but then it's sending us triggers, or when it's triggered, it's sending us things to say, hey, you're unsafe again. So it's working, it's just really, it can add to that stress reaction. So we're going to talk just a little bit about common emotional and behavioral reactions. I'm going to talk about children a little bit, and then we're going to move into self-care, and then we're going to end with some case management, because I don't want to bore you. But with children, you know, ages 1 to 5, you have the different things are on the screen that happen. But what I know about kids, being a mother, being a grandmother, what I know is children play what they know. And what that means is if they have a family member that's experiencing cancer, they play that. If parents are going through a divorce or a relationship has ended, they play that. They play abuse. They play all sorts of things. They also play when a disaster happens. So one of the most effective things we've been able to do, like I said, we rolled up in our very plain Jane trailer, but we were able to offer some services, and we were able to let kids do lots of really cool things. So helping kids play helps them process what they've seen. So for everybody in this room, when we worry 24/7, like our eyes pop open and it's like, oh, there that is. And then we go to bed, it's probably still in our minds, right? But children, the way their brains are designed and developing, tend to think in chunks of time. So the play helps them process, because they don't have the verbal skills to talk to their friends, to talk to a professional or whatever. They just tend to not have those. So they process it in different ways. So just the different things that you're going to see with children involved in trauma and in disasters, catastrophes, and that sort of thing. And I know Jenny shared a great story about how old was your children with 9/11?
My daughter was 3.
3. And correct me, but when she kept seeing things on TV, she thought that 9/11 was still happening over and over and over. And we know that it's a news, it's just, but she thought, and I think that's really important to remember developmentally. So when kids are exposed to media, that's one of the things that you can really pay attention to. So at ages 6 to 10, they're going to lose interest in friends, family, have nightmares, difficulty sleeping, complain of physical problems. One of the things I always say is when children tell you that their stomach hurts, like at school, typically serotonin is released in the brain, and also it can be stored in the stomach. So a lot of times the stomach does hurt, so it's a real thing when they get anxious. And then feeling depressed, emotionally numb, or guilt over what's happened. It's the same thing for us. There's lots of different stages to grief and trauma, but I want you to take that moment and think about when something happened to you, the different stages that you went through. And I remember so many people talked about being numb. They just were a little bit in shock, right? Totally just shock about what had happened because homes were gone. We had a situation where we had a teen who lost 2 very close family members, a sibling and a parent, in Mayfield. Then he was at the hospital, and then when the tornado hit Dawson Springs, he lost a grandparent. So think about that. So you're numb, you're trying to process it, trying to digest it, but also there comes a place where you kind of word vomit, and it's just, you just regurgitate everything. If any of you have gone through something like that, you tell people who have no connection, and it was weird. As a therapist, I'm in the business of keeping things private and keeping people's very sacred information. But I also know that there comes a time when you're in that stage where you just tell random people things you would never tell them. So sharing is part of it. And I always got a kick out of people who would say, I would stop and get gas somewhere and tell the person at the cashier what had happened to me in great detail, and that's not who I am. I'm like, well, that's actually kind of a stage of what happens. So I thought that was interesting, though, but we kind of don't identify it. And children can do the same thing as well. And then, of course, flashbacks, with storms, triggers, different things like that. Even the weather radios, the noises that they make, these are a huge trigger to a lot of children. Losing interest in hobbies or fun activities, isolating, having suicidal thoughts, all of those things can really, really affect, school performance and just their overall physical and emotional health. So I want to talk about when to seek help. So initially, we're going through all those stages with adults and with kids, but after about 4 to 6 weeks, if we're still having great difficulty functioning, that's when you know, hey, I need to talk to someone on a professional level. So think about that for a moment, about 4 to 6 weeks. And then if it continues to worsen over time, they seem to keep decompensating instead of improving. That's obviously very important to be aware of. And then the child's reaction when they react negatively to like schoolwork and relationships. So with stress, think about your nerves. I think of like a rubber band, like everything sets us off, right? It's very easily to be like abrupt and abrasive. And that's because with all these chemicals kind of flowing through our body, and adrenaline is flowing as well, which then makes us very tired and very agitated. So when you have those sorts of things that are flooding your body day after day, then you get the adrenaline fatigue. And your body's like, hey, over here, I'm just going to check out. I just can't keep feeling everything I feel, and I certainly can't operate the way that I've been operating. Those of you in your personal life, think about all the different things that you do. And we can do anything for a short time period, right? But we're not designed to do it for a lifetime. We just completed a training for a healthcare organization. We do one each month for their staff. And it's really neat to be able to do that. But what we tell them is they are in chronic stress. So they may save a life one day, just like you all. But the next shift, it's back to the same thing. And that's pushing your body to release a lot of different chemicals. And that's where the burnout and compassion fatigue and adrenaline fatigue come into play. So what do you do about that? Well, the same thing with children. So you're going to minimize the child's exposure to media, and you're going to minimize your own as well. How good does it feel to be home and not be on your phone? Anybody do that much? I'm stunned at how productive I could be. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot I could do all that. But I've got to leave it alone, you know. So children are the same way. You're going to minimize their exposure. But when they do see the news or something is on, you need to be able to watch it with them and then ask if they have any questions and that sort of thing. So you want them to be informed if they're, you know, at an age, I always say at about 8 on up or 10 on up. But before that, it's really, news is typically not real helpful. So you're going to keep them engaged with opportunities to talk. And they're going to talk about what they've gone through and what they're seeing in the media. The same thing that we do, right? That's processing. That is, okay, I've got all these thoughts and I've got to get it out. Because when I get it out, you're going to help me know, hey, that might be a wrong read. That might be a cognitive distortion. That just might be my perception. It might not be accurate, right? And isn't it cool to have that one person in your life that gives you great information and great feedback, but also kind of calls you out and says, okay, you're off base? Well, that's really good in this situation too, even with kids. So, because a lot of children will become very, very anxious and make everything much larger than it needs to be because that's been their history. So teaching them that this is going to be okay, this is a hard thing, and this is what we're going to do to help, and it's okay to feel the way that you do, but also help regulate. So keep in mind that when we do our corporate trainings and different things, that the happiest, most successful people that we know also are the people that are the most regulated, right? So as a therapist, when I first started, I thought those really happy, successful people, they were just lucky. They just didn't have the problems that I thought I had. They were just super, super lucky. No. When I started working with them, I'm like, oh my goodness, whew, how fortunate am I that I don't have to deal with that. The happy, most successful people, and I work with them every day, are resilient and they're good at navigating their life's problems. They're really, but you have to teach that. We're not born to do that. You teach that to children. You have to teach that to your departments. You have to teach that to your first responders, for your healthcare providers. You have to teach that we get good at problem solving and we get good at navigating. We're not just lucky. And you're going to acknowledge and validate their concerns. You're going to comfort them, help them feel understood, even if their feelings and their fears seem really unrelated or not even relevant. That's okay. Sometimes children and adults talk about safe things when it's really not the safe things that they're worried about. And we always talk about, as a therapist, the last 5 minutes of session. A lot of times someone will drop, oh my gosh, that would have been great to have known going into the session. But they drop it right before they're going to walk out the door because maybe they've never shared that before, or it feels really unsafe to talk about that. So kids may act like they're sad about a stuffed animal or whatever, but really maybe because their friend's moving, or maybe it's because they heard something about their parent that they are fearful about, or maybe their parent is sick or whatever that is. So those safe topics are often just a way to really, really focus on deeper things. I want to talk for just a minute about movement and healthy diet. So So physical activity can burn off the adrenaline, release mood-boosting endorphins, and help to improve sleep. So you're going to encourage kids to play in sports or lots of different things. I always ask first responders that have been doing it a long time, and the last group I worked with, most of them had been there 10 to 15 years plus, and I said, how do you do it? And everyone told me they had one hobby or one activity that they said kept them, quote, sane. And it was like mowing their yard, working outside, reading, woodworking, volunteering, music. There was one thing that they got to recharge about. And it typically was not a recliner and a beer and tea. That was not it. And I was like, that's pretty amazing. So, and I always ask people, you want to have a really good conversation? Ask someone to tell you something, like a group of people you think that you know well, that you work with. Ask the question, tell me something about yourself that someone doesn't know. The room gets really quiet and really, really interesting. So it's really cool. So think about in your life, what's the one thing that recharges you? Refurnishing, furniture. What do you do? Is it writing? Is it animals, pets? What's the one thing that really, really reminds you that you have a purpose in this life? And the purpose is not just to survive, but you have a purpose in this life. And your responsibility is to have a great life. Even though it's colorful, with bumps and textures and hard and difficult things. One of the things about food that and we're learning more and more about diet and mental health. And many years ago, when I actually practiced in Benton, one of the things I learned is children with ADHD and trichotillomania, which is where the body has a sensation and it kind of itches and people tend to pull out like hair and different things. A lot of that is related to dyes in foods, reds, yellow dyes, and all of those tasty treats like, I don't want to say the products, but Cheetos, Doritos, Mountain Dew, all of those, Kool-Aid, those dyes in some people, particularly some children, can be very agitating and make them wiggle and scoop and fidget and also kind of pull at their skin or pick or different things. What we're learning is diet is really, really important. When people go through a disaster, one of the hardest things to do is to eat healthy, right? Because you're strapped for everything, and sometimes the food's just not even there. So it's really important that you eat as healthy as possible. It really affects your emotional and mental health, and particularly children. You're also going to be rebuilding some trust and a sense of safety. You're going to keep your promises. You're going to be honest, and you never lie to anyone. You never lie to children, but you also tell children only what they're able to understand at the moment. And that sometimes takes a professional. And I have worked with people whose parents, or children whose parents have passed away and had to be there with family and say, how do we tell them this? And you always tell them the truth, but sometimes you leave out the details that they can digest when they're 15 versus 5, right? So you work, and in our office, we're always trying to navigate that. It's okay if you don't know something. It's okay. Healthy people don't know everything. I was scared when people think they know everything, but unhealthy people do. So it's okay. Don't be ashamed to admit, I just don't know. And remember that children will personalize situations, and it's important to offer reassurance after traumatic events. This is where children will say, is it my fault that my parents got divorced? Or I threw a fit this morning when someone had a car accident. I've had those conversations with adults who spent their entire life blaming themselves because they were abused or because something happened to someone. And what I do is I'll say, pull out a picture of yourself at that age. Let's just say someone was 10 or 12 years old. And then I'm like, what could a child that age do? Or pick out someone like at Walmart. How could they be savvy enough to avoid being abused or to prevent an accident? They can't. But when you put it in concrete terms, it takes a lot of the shame and the blame off of, because we think about bad things in the past as the whatever age we are adult, but those children are very different. So we assign our past younger selves with a lot more power than they had. So I think that can be really healing as well. So self-care after disasters. It's really, really tough because in our area, this has been going on for a year and a month. And we still have people who don't have homes, who don't have access to health care, who financially have lost everything. You know, we have held our Christmas party at Mayfield this year because we felt like we wanted to show that we're still there and to support our Mayfield office. And I think we had, 150-ish people at the event. But I got lost on my way back because after I left where we held it, because the town didn't look like it did. And I'm like, I don't know where I'm at. This does not look like the same town. Obviously, I know where my office is at. And I was just shocked. And I had to Google how to get out of town because it looked so very different. So it's okay to cry. It's okay to give yourself a time when your body just doesn't function very well. That's part of it. But you can't stay there. You know, after something bad happens, we tend to just, retreat and isolate. And you can do that for a few days or a week or so. But after that, you have to really, really work hard to start functioning again. So that's always, as a therapist, one of the things we're looking at is your ability to function. One of our goals in treatment planning is return the patient to a prior level of functioning. So think about yourself. Like, when did I function really, really well in my life? When did I feel the happiest, the most productive, the calmest? When was this? 15 years ago? Was it last year? What were you doing at that time? And it's not because of a relationship or somebody else. It was because the things that you were doing in your life that you felt joy, purpose, and a sense of calmness. I'm going to say this: avoid over-identifying with survivors. You know, the worst thing in the world when someone goes through something is for someone else to say, I know how you feel. So we don't. Even if our situation, even if our houses were next to each other, and both houses were taken by the tornado, we still don't know how that person felt. We know how we feel, and we can relate with a lot of the things, the frustration and being scared and the financial, issues, but we still don't know how someone else feels because they're a different person. So never over-identify with survivors. The best thing you can say is, I can't imagine how you feel. I can't imagine how you're doing this, but I'm amazed, and I'm going to be here and support you and be on this journey with you. And I'm going to learn from you, because that's what healthy people do. But we don't tell them what's going to happen, how they're going to feel, how they should feel, and my goodness, we know what it's like, because we don't. And that gets back to gratitude, humility, and your own spiritual health. So self-care after disasters, surround yourself with positivity. Yes, yes, and yes. You still have to recognize, because it's so doom and gloom, the wonderful things about your life and your life moving forward. And you're going to watch for reactions that last longer than 4 to 6 weeks and impact relationships. But you're going to find the self-care is really, how do you avoid burnout? Well, we talked about one of the biggest things is really designing something in your life that gives you joy, that you look forward to, that recharges you. And then we talk with our staff, and one of our mission this year is stewardship, taking good care of things, but it's also leaving a legacy. And the fact is, everyone in this room is going to leave a legacy. I like to think mine's going to be very colorful, but we're all going to leave a legacy, whether it's positive or negative, and design that legacy. And that means you own your struggles and the things you don't do so well with, but everybody has a legacy. But you can't predict bad things that will happen to you. But what you can do is you can determine how you're going to handle those when they do happen by taking care of yourself, by developing spiritual health, and the 5 people that you're around most of the time are the people that you tend to be like. And if you have healthy, wonderful people, you're probably going to be healthy and wonderful. If you're around 5 toxic, gossipy, drama-filled, negative people, you're probably not going to be as happy as you normally would be. So those 5 people that you're around is very important. So self-care. I think think for us as therapists, we have to work really, really hard, doing it as a career. My biggest fear is when we hire new people is, can they do this? Can they do this day after day after day? When they've had an argument, when they're going through a divorce, when they're struggling with their finances, can they be healthy enough to treat people? Same thing for our medical providers and our first responders. Can you be healthy enough to help people? Because folks, like it or not, we are the helpers. And what's the saying, look for the helpers, always look for the helpers. It doesn't mean we're perfect, it means we're the helpers. But in order to stay the helpers, we have to invest in ourselves. Invest physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. We have to have a good life if we're going to continue to be the helpers. And there are lots of reasons we think that might not help or happen, but it really, really is important. So spiritual health, I want you to journal. I want you to develop some relationships. It's not about if you go to church or where you go to church, but it's about something bigger than you, identifying something that's going to direct your path and intervene for you, whatever that is, something to spend your time and emotion on that recharges you, a really great team around you, and in changing your mindset that you are designed to do hard things. Thank you very much. Mary?
You gotta turn your mic off real quick for that to work.
Questions? Anybody?
Hello. Hi, I'm Mary Gellerson. I'm the case management director at Emerald. And just like Shelly said, look for the helpers, right? So what I want to talk about is a specific kind of helper called a case manager. So there's a holistic approach to care by collaborating with a team to ensure clients are getting the best care possible. Is anyone in the room a case manager? Case management is, when I think about the disaster and the tornado, some of the most important helpers that I saw were my case management team, and maybe that's because I'm biased because I was on one of them. But they were the connectors. They were the navigators. They were the support systems during that time. How many of you have dealt with, let's say, a parent dying, right? Right after, in the middle of your grief, you are required to start planning, right? I had a father pass away last year, and it's awful. I mean, you have to go through all that grieving, and then you go right into planning. So during the tornado, I had clients that were grieving the loss of family or their homes, and they could not manage to get through their day to plan. I mean, and they needed a lot of help in that. Some of these folks didn't know how to advocate for themselves. So my team of case managers were able to come together and help those folks navigate the system, make phone calls, teach them how to advocate for themselves. So what I would tell you in times of crisis is to, like she said, look for the helpers. So what case management can do is they can talk to employers, go with you to schools, advocate for you in IEP meetings, and provide community supports, help connect you to food assistance, vocational supports, those kinds of things. There we go. Identifying linking clients to other support services within Emerald or services outside Emerald. There's a lot of case management programs outside of Emerald that are supportive. I'm going to point PACS out. There's a member from PACS here. There's a program there called Community Collaboration for Children that's also very helpful for community supports. Expanding a client social network. Resource linkage to food, utility assistance, clothing donation, other community resources, linking to employment opportunities, and teaching vocational skills. Your case managements are navigators through all these systems, and they're going to help connect you to the right places. So if you feel like you have someone that needs so much support, whether that be in the schools, if you're a Frisbee, and you see, oh my gosh, I've helped this particular kiddo and their family out 1,000 times. They're just not that self-sufficient. They need extra help and extra support. Find an agency that's got some case management to guide them through that process. So we access, we link, and we plan. For instance, I had a client that had an issue getting a job, right? And they, and at first I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they need help getting their resume out there. So what I learned from that particular client is that they had given all sorts of resumes out there for employment opportunities. But what they were doing is they were calling aggressively every single place that they were trying to get a job and sort of bullying them for not calling them back, right? So in that instance, we had to teach social skills support. Having our case managers have a wide variety of skills, and a lot of them in the area are trauma informed. So like all the things that we've learned today about trauma, my case managers are definitely trauma informed. I think that's way super important to understand because everyone that comes through our building is likely experienced some form of trauma. And there's plenty in the area. I know it's a super popular training. I don't know of any teachers in the area that have a trauma-informed care. If not, there's a ton of free ones I can connect you to. If you saw any of the trauma information that you're interested in, I can help connect you to those as well. Thank you.
I think for us, the reason that case management is so very important is, as a therapist, you can have an amazing session, you can do the best work in your life in that, 60 minutes, but when that person leaves, if they're still homeless after that session, it doesn't matter. It felt good for an hour, and then real life happened. So case management is about, the basic needs and advocating. And now with technology and all the menus on phones and computers, it's so frustrating to our older generation who don't know how to navigate those things, and they give up and they get frustrated. It's scary. So I think case management advocates, and it helps with all of those other things so that therapists and medical providers and things like that can do the work that they're supposed to be able to focus on and what we were trained to do. So, and then we can't change what's happened. Our power is learning how to think about it differently. So that's true of cognitive behavioral therapy, and that means that we cannot change any event that has happened. Our power is in learning to think about it differently. Because when we think about it differently, we feel differently about it, and then we behave differently as well. And that's really the power. So maybe you're stronger than you thought, or you were able to reach out and to help people. All right. And then I'm going to introduce Jenny Moorhead. She is our Emerald Foundation. We also have a nonprofit that started here in Benton as the Forget Me Not Children's Center many, many moons ago. And it's been renamed, and she's now our director. So I'll let her tell you about that. And then thank you for today.
I have one good picture, and you saw it briefly. And the rest of the time, there's this woman that's gray-headed and much bigger than I thought, jump in front of me every time. So I like seeing her picture because she just. So my name is Jenny Moorhead. I'm the director of the Emerald Foundation, and my background is a little different. I am not a caseworker. I am not a social worker. I am an occupational safety and health engineer. So my background is in heavy industrial construction. That's how I made my living. But I love people, and I paid for school by working as a laborer in construction and also being an EMT. So I love everything about helping people, whether they're hurt or whether they are on a job and they're fixing to use a welding lead, or they're on a barge deck, or whatever the case may be. And so the opportunity to be part of the Emerald Foundation for me is I'm still helping people. And that's what I like being in front of people, and that's what we do. We provide corporate wellness programs for companies and organizations and groups, and we partner with the Emerald Therapy because there's so many people on that side that help us get that word out, whether it's a one-on-one class or whether we go in and we do a program and we identify somebody that needs case management or needs help. We have a whole bank of people who can help us do that. And so my job is to go out into the community and talk and bring mental health and wellness to light, because nothing is more fun than walking into a room of 100 men, no offense girls, but most of the time I was dealing with all men, walk into a room of 100 men and go, let's talk about your feelings. Oh, they love that. They're like, Awesome, yes, let's do that. And they're like, where's the donuts? Because you're making me tired. So my job is to bring it to light and make it a conversation that's as normal as it is for me to say to them, wear your hard hat and safety glasses. I want you out there. Do you have all of your stuff on your unit? Do you have everything that you need? And that's the same thing, just what's in your toolbox, and that's part of it. And so that's what the Emerald Foundation does. If there anybody here, our whole purpose in life is when we finish doing those types of things, all the money that we make and the proceeds go right back into assisting patients, children, and teens that don't have the resources to be able to help. So I get to help all the people I love, and then I get to turn around and take it and help all the people over there that I love too. And so it's a really great job. It's a lot of fun. But the foundation itself, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me, Shelly. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Miss Mary. Because that's what we're here for. We're a 501c3, just like a lot of the people in this room, and we're here to help and to partner with others to get that help out there. So, thank you.
Well, let me ask this before we wrap up. Tell me something about going through this that you have taken away, that you feel like you've taken something to have a good life out of it. Anybody have anything that, like I said, we wouldn't choose this, but what's the one thing that you're like, well, you know, what I learned from this that's going to help me? Anybody at all?
Lots of good people. There are a lot of good people. I worked at the supply distribution point in Hopkins County right after the tornado. And we had so much stuff and so many people wanting to volunteer pouring in that place. It would absolutely blow your mind. So it's easy to get jaded and cynical and stuff like that, and then something like that happens. There were a lot of examples, but this one really stuck in my mind. I showed up down there one morning about 7 o'clock, and there was a pickup truck parked in the parking lot. We were working out of an old strip mall. And there was a pickup truck parked out in the lot with this humongous load of stuff shrink wrapped over the top of it. And I pulled in, and these two guys got out of the truck. They got there the night before. They slept in the truck. And the guy said, we got some stuff for y'all. We saw that at the news, and we had some stuff. And so they started cutting all the shrink wrap off. These guys were from a body shop in New Jersey.
Oh my goodness.
And it wasn't just bottled water. I mean, these guys were bringing generators, high dollar stuff that they had just collected from their friends. They built this humongous rig hanging off this truck. It was like almost like a semi-truck by the time they got through with it. And then they took it to a boat yard, then put the shrink wrap all over it so it wouldn't blow off on the way from New Jersey to Madisonville. And, it was just two guys that sounded just like somebody from The Sopranos. I mean, the whole accent, the whole nine. And, they unloaded the truck and then they left. And I was like, oh my God. It's amazing. And that's the thing that I took out of it was, just when you think, it's so easy for you to think, it sucks, you done with it. And then something like that happens, and you say, well, maybe y'all don't know.
Yes. Thank you all very, very much. It's been an honor to be here today. We have enjoyed it. We'll be around afterwards for any questions or comments.